Let's move on to the next talk on organ donation and transplantation in South Asia, our barriers and solutions. May I invite our speaker, Dr. Sunil Shroff, for the talk. I take this opportunity to invite the chairpersons for this talk, Dr. Rahul Pandit and Dr. Kapil Sirpe. Over to the chairpersons. May I also invite Dr. Avnish Seth to chair the session. Over to the chairpersons.
So let's get started. Can you please put the slides on? If you look at South Asia, which consists of about 8 countries, it only holds about 4% of the world's landmass, but 1/4 of the world population, huge. So it's one of the most populous and most densely populated geographical regions in the world. I'm going to cover the limited access to dialysis and transplant surgery in this part of the world, mistrust in the healthcare system, acceptance of brain death concept, our religious and cultural issues related to organ donation, and what are our solutions, some examples of excellence and hope. The incidence of kidney failure in this region is about 232 per million population. The incidence is rising because of the rise in diabetes and hypertension, as we all know. The requirement for kidneys is 232 per million, that is 400,000 kidneys. But only 95,000 get some kind of renal replacement therapy in form of dialysis or transplant. Risk factors for access in South Asia for CKD includes biological factors, environmental factors, and limited access to healthcare. The biological factors include low birth weight, genetic predisposition to kidney disease, and poor nutrition, and then exposure to pollutants, increased exposure to communicable diseases, lack of clean water and sanitation. Limited access to healthcare includes travel greater distance to reach tertiary care centers and out-of-pocket resources. So the disadvantaged population in the region reacts very slowly to illness due to lack of access and knowledge. If you look at our workforce, the hemodialysis unit in the region, about 8 countries, this is a little old data, but more or less, quite, okay. India, of course, has large number of hemodialysis units, about 11,000 machines. Number of nephrologists is perhaps now more, probably about 2,000. But overall, if you see, what I'm trying to show in this busy slide is we have 1 nephrologist per million population in this region compared to 40 in Spain and 28 in the US. The lack of trained manpower infrastructure hampers preventable measures of early diagnosis and prompt management of CKD. Because prevention is so important, if you want to bridge the gap between demand and supply, prevention has to be right there in the forefront, but we don't have the manpower. Live organ transplants takes place in 5 out of 8 countries in this region. Only 2 countries do disease donation, and India is the only country which does multi-organ transplants, including things like hand and uterus transplants now. We also have some infamous kind of, we've been called the hub for transplant tourism, but so on. If you look at the organ donation rate in South Asia, overall about 8 per million population, and Sri Lanka and India have disease donation around 0.6 to 0.8 per million population. Again, these figures are, I have actually personally, try to follow up to get these figures. So let us look at the next 3 challenges, and I put them all together, clubbed it together in one lot. The societal issues with mistrust in healthcare system, because private healthcare system dominates, and media perpetuates a lot of distrust in the system. There are misconceptions about brain death. And then, of course, religious and cultural barriers. Mistrust towards healthcare system, this is a survey done by Times of India along with us in August 2015 of 8 cities. And what they found in the 687 sample survey was that almost all those who were aware of organ donation but were not signed up to it, the reasons were, 29% said, if I agree to donate my organs, the hospital staff won't work hard enough to save my life. And 32% said, maybe I won't really be dead when I sign up my death certificate is signed. Mistrust towards healthcare system is also perpetuated by media and the movies in India. We had this Tamil movie released in Chennai, And then when the Mohan Foundation staff went to do, kind of organ donation campaign, most of it, people in the IT company didn't want to, take up the pledge card because they were worried after seeing these movies. When we asked them, they said that fear of organs being stolen, as shown in the Tamil movie, was one reason why they didn't want to sign up. Again, rich and famous will jump the queue is another belief they have. The potential of brain death in India is huge because we have 8.4 million people dying every year, estimated 1 to 4% of such deaths is due to brain death. And if you look at our roads, obviously, huge number of accidents leading to brain death. And in one estimation, we found that 400 deaths in a day, or 147,000 fatal deaths due to RTA, 67% have head injury. Potentially, there are 95,000 brain injuries in the countries. So there are a lot of potential donors. So there's a huge pool out there. The language conveyed about brain death by doctors to relatives, again, is sometimes not right. They're said kept alive for organ donation. If they're alive, why should they donate organs? Kept on life support instead of saying kept on artificial or mechanical ventilation. So the trained, not trained staff tend to use wrong language. So this poor communication leads to more distrust. The cultural reservations, things like if I'm born, if I donate my organs, I'll be born without them and so on. Many of them are there. This is because of the rebirth and reincarnation philosophy of Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, and Sikhism. Islam and organ donation, again, there are myths in this part of the region. God created us as whole, we prefer to return as whole, and so on. So the disease donation rate in South Asia among Muslims is very low. In fact, we had a donor in Hyderabad, and he said, please don't tell my community that I donated the organs for my son because they'll disown me. But in one study which we did in Government General Hospital in Chennai, in over 4 years, we had 188 deaths. 58 said no to donation. Only 14, that is 24%, the no was due to religious barriers. There are hospital issues with low donation rate as well. Knowledge deficit, there's poor knowledge of brain death among the doctors. Counseling of families by trained counselors is not happening. Surgical skills sometimes is lacking for both, in disease donation, although they're very well trained in living donation. So there's an initial struggle when a program starts on disease donation in many hospitals in the country. So the knowledge deficit leads to lack of identification, certification, and maintenance of brain death. It does not happen. Supporting families to decision to donate through trained counseling does not happen. And education about organ donation and brain death among medical professionals is lacking as much as is lacking in the general public. So what are the solutions? And what are the examples which give us some hope? So let's look at that. I think capacity building and training is the key to success for disease donor transplant in this country. We have to train the ICU staff. We have to train the coordinators. And we have to train surgeons. And again, we need police sensitization as well. Training of coordinators has been happening by Mohan Foundation. We have trained more than now 2,600 coordinators over the last 11 years. The impact of these training is 70% success when they speak to the family. Again, we are doing training of ICU doctors in identification certification. We have conducted 14 workshops as Mohan Foundation. That again has had some good impact. We train surgeons in retrieval techniques and how to do transplantation. And we conduct this with Dr. Sonal Asthana in Bangalore in MS Ramaiah Wet Lab. And we have conducted more than 6 surgical workshops along with the Oxford group, where faculty has come from Oxford. And that has also had good impact because surgeons have gone back and actually done heart transplants without having been to any other center, at least in 2 or 3 public sector hospitals in Madurai and in Gujarat. We also need to restore the equity imbalance to build public trust. Because most transplant activity happen in tertiary care private hospitals. But the disease donor pool is low in private hospitals, hence most are doing high number of living donor transplants. So if you look at the living donor transplants, in fact, in number-wise, maybe per million population we are low, but number-wise, India does the maximum number of kidney transplants in the world, followed by US. So what we need to do is restore the equity, and to build trust, because there is a big pool in the public sector hospitals or government hospitals, as most of the road traffic accidents will go to the government hospital because of the medical legal implications. So what we need to do is we need to, although the government lacks infrastructure, we need to build the infrastructure in these government hospitals. There are 300 government medical colleges, and we have given a proposal to the government of India to at least start making them a retrieval center, followed by at least kidney transplant program, because they have all the infrastructure available. All they need is a little bit of capacity building and training, and then at least start doing that, because if you want to use the pool, then you need to transplant also the organs in the government hospital. You can't take the organs from one hospital, government, to the private hospital, and that will create distrust. So we need to give access to these patients as well. We do have models of excellence in this region. The Sindh Institute in Pakistan, in Karachi, led by Dr. Rijvi, is great. It is doing some tremendous work in this region. Then we have Sathya Sai hospitals in India, IKRDC in Gujarat, Tankar in Chennai. They're doing some excellent work. We have National Kidney Foundation in Bangladesh. We have National Kidney Care Center in Nepal, all doing excellent work. The eye donation program of Sri Lanka has been a huge success. It was started in 1961. 1 in 5 Sri Lankans have pledged to donate their corneas. There are 1.3 million registered eye donors with the society. And they receive 3,000 corneas a year, and more than 2,000 exported throughout the world. And the late president himself donated his corneas. We have an MOU in Tamil Nadu. I just want to show this as a pilot, and we have duplicated this pilot in many other government hospitals. We signed an MOU in 2009, and look at what happened in Chennai. With just one small MOU, over like about 5 years, we identified about 170 brain deaths. 113 families said yes to donation, 55 said no, and this resulted, this was a 66% conversion. And with just one hospital, we had 645 organs and tissues, just by one MOU, 4-5 years later. So these are examples of hope. Look at the corneal donation rate. Every year we have almost 70,000 corneas donated. Our per million donation rate of corneas is almost 38 per million population. In Sri Lanka, the eye donation rate, the society has donated 54,000 corneas to 57 countries, including countries like China, Pakistan, Thailand, and Japan. So there are some examples of excellence. What it shows is there is a community support, there is a societal support for these kind of activities, provided we put the processes in place properly. We also have the Buddhist and Jain community, where there is a high donation rate because they believe in Dhan, they believe in giving as a core philosophy, in their religion. And 4 countries in this region have eye donation program. In India, 96 families donate corneas on their own every day, of their loved ones, So there is, as I said, societal support for this kind of activity, provided we take it forward. And 30,000 people donate blood, by the way. I mean, blood is, of course, not necessarily the same comparison, but it just gives an indicator. It's an indicator that, yes, people will donate. The disease donation also produces communal harmony. Hindus donated to Muslims, swaps between Muslims and Hindus, patients from Pakistan getting heart and heart transplants in India. This does produce some communal harmony. So in summary, South Asia is a highly populated region with high organ failure rate, low transplant rate. What holds back is not from donating is not religion, but cultural reservations. There is no consensus in organ donation among Muslim population in this region. There is a distrust in healthcare system in the region that does not help the cause. Brain death concept is not well understood. Creating trust through access for transplants to less affordable and capacity building is key to overcome the barriers. The high corneal donation rates indicates support from the society. NGOs and volunteers have contributed to the growth of the program tremendously, and what provides hope are the success stories in the region. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Shroff. That was excellent. So over to my co-chairs.
Yeah, Dr. Shroff, thank you. As usual, it is a thought-provoking this thing. But sir, always the question remains in my mind. After 25 years also, we are struggling to create that trust among the society. How you will look at in the future? Because see, still we are talking about trust, we are still talking about the religious barriers, still we are talking about the government and private promotion activities or whatever the link in between. So how you look at in your future, because you are the one who was working since last more than 20, 25 years in this field.
I'm very hopeful with the Ayushman Bharat scheme trying to cover 40 crore Indians. And now, if you on 27th of September, we have a health card released, which every Indian will have. And you'll be pleased to know, Dr. Zirpe, that, Government of India has included kidney transplant in the Ayushman Bharat scheme, which means that the key here, Dr. Zirpe, is going to be always this challenge of providing transplant to the less affordable. And once we start doing that, the trust will build in the system. It's not going to be easy because our GDP contribution to health by the Government of India is not even 2% as yet. The private parties' GDP is more than 4% to the health. So this is a very large problem. It is not only the problem of transplants, remember that. Transplant is a very small part of the whole ecosystem. It's an overall, the health has been a neglected subject in the country for many, many years since independence. It's the first time that the Government of India, after the COVID, has woken up and health has come to the forefront. And I'm hoping in the next 5 years, the government will take more proactive steps, just like the health card which has started, Ayushman Bharat scheme. If this can really revolutionize. Many state governments are providing subsidy. Government of Tamil Nadu, for that matter, gives money for liver transplant up to 20 lakhs, even to a private hospital of a patient who has been transplanted in a private hospital, a government less affordable patient. But what we need to do is we need to start doing this in the government hospitals itself. 300 medical colleges, one of the highest number of medical colleges in the world. Come on, they have all the infrastructure to do everything. Why can't we just start doing kidney transplants in those institutes so that we can start doing those transplants? And why should government have to pay money to the private sector to have a patient transplanted in their own hospital? The less affordable patient, why should they be paying 5 lakhs and 20 lakhs to a private hospital? The same money can be pumped into the government hospital and we can start doing transplants more and more.
I agree with you, sir.
Hi, Dr. Shroff, Rahul here.
Hi, Rahul. Thank you.
Hi. I agree with you on the point of government putting in more money and private, instead of private hospitals, the public hospitals contributing. But what about the donation rates? So donation rates in our country are completely skewed. In some states, it is the private sector which is completely into the, the maximum donors are coming from the private hospitals. In some states, it's the public hospitals. Why are we not able to achieve that equity, that across the country we have an equal private and public balance which is sort of maintained? Why is it so skewed across the country?
I'll tell you, very, very simple, Rahul. It is because the healthcare itself, if you look at in various parts of the country, the different states are in different, process of evolution. Healthcare down south or in the west is much better. Access is better. You get better infrastructure even in the government hospitals compared to what you get in the East. If you look at the East, then the healthcare has not developed as much in the government hospital or for that matter even in the private hospital. So again, there's a disbalance. If we need to look at that, of the 37 states and union territories we have in these countries, only 16 do any kind of transplants. And of that, only less number do disease donation transplants. So there is the whole thing is not necessarily India is a huge country, but there are countries within the country, and some states do extremely well. So it's not that it's not happening. The process is slow. It will happen. We will need to pump in more money towards health in all parts of the country. And I think I am very hopeful. I am very hopeful that over the next decade, we will have better health infrastructure in this country, in most hospitals. The Ayushman Bharat scheme, again, the Prime Minister's dialysis yojana, wants to do, there are 728 districts in this country, and they want to put a dialysis unit in each district, at least to start off with. So these are proactive steps, and I think there is hope.
Good.
Well, we don't have necessarily answers to every question, Rahul, but I think we're getting there.
Yeah.
Any other questions from the audience, other participants?
You only have to, it's difficult to ask questions from the audience, so it's mostly the chairpersons doing the job, unless they key it in the chatbots. But you
Sure.
guys are really missing a great conference in Cochin, wonderful city and wonderful hospitality.
Lovely.
So I think in the interest of time, we close the session. Thank you, Dr. Shroff, and thank you, Rahul and Kapil, and all the participants.
Thank you.
Over to you,
Thank you.
Vivek.
Thank you, Shroff.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. We are running short of time. I thank the speaker and the chairpersons for the talk.